How's it going, guys? Yoso back here with another video, and I hope you're having an amazing week so far. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that I really enjoy and that I'm very passionate about. And I know you're probably thinking, well, Yosef, you're always passionate about all the topics that you cover, and you're absolutely right. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't really enjoying it. So today I wanted to talk to you about why it's still relevant to drive a manual transmission car in 2024. Now, before you say, Yosef, you're a dinosaur and you got to stop with pushing all this old technology on us, hear me out, because I have a few really good points and some of them may really interest you and potentially might change your mind. The first reason why you should drive a manual car in 2024 is it's just fun. It's so much more fun and engaging to drive than an automatic. When you get into an automatic, and I know the paddle shifters on a lot of cars are really great too, and they're probably even better on a track because you can go quicker and all of that, I get that. But when you drive a manual transmission car and you've got both feet on the pedals and you're changing gears and you're enjoying all that engagement of literally moving the gear lever, that's fun. That's exciting. It's interesting. It puts you in that whole feeling of being in a Fast and Furious movie, or I don't know, Gone in 60 Seconds, or something really fun where there was a great car chase and all you see is a clips of somebody changing gears. It's fun. You feel like you're in a video game, but you're driving the car and you're manipulating things. You're making things work mechanically, and you're not just pressing buttons and letting the car figure it out for you. Driving cars should be engaging and it should be a fun experience. And there are people who won't care about that, and I get it. But for me, I truly believe that it makes the experience of driving a car that much better. And I truly enjoy it. And anybody who drives a manual car will probably feel that way too, even though it sucks sometimes being stuck in traffic. The second reason why you may want to buy a manual car in 2024 is it just allows you to have more control over the car. Let's be honest, when you drive an automatic transmission car that has 6, 7, 8, 10 different gears in it, it's always trying to figure out what to do, and you have no idea what's going on the back end. It just sort of operates. And people who know about cars obviously will understand it a little bit more, but most people are oblivious to what's going on inside the car. And the problem with that is, if it's icy on the road and you don't have it in the right mode, or your traction control isn't working so well or whatever, you don't know how to sort of manage the gears to be in so that you're not, spinning your wheels all the time, or, just being aware of what happens when the gears change and how that disrupts the balance of the car, and, what gear you might want to be in for more fuel efficiency or for performance. It's just an awareness of what's going on in the car and having more control over what happens. A lot of times you find people are on the highway and they're driving and they, put their foot down. They're like, all right, waiting for it to kick down, and it takes a minute or two, and then it finally gives you that surge of energy and you're ready to go. But you could have changed gears on your own. You could have done that in a way that allowed you to be prepared and sort of figure that out so that you can prevent yourself from having to wait or maybe lose that spot in traffic. So these are things that just, you don't always think about when you're driving an automatic. And when you have a manual car, you can't not think about it. You have to think about it because you have to be the one changing gears and controlling the way the car works. And so you become a little bit more in tune with what's happening with the driving experience over somebody who's driving an automatic car. And the other point that goes along with it is you're just more aware of your surroundings. When you're in an automatic car, you just sort of drive. But when you drive a manual, you have to see what's the gradient of the drop that I'm about to go down, or the hill that I'm about to go up, or is there a traffic light a few meters ahead that's going to change in a minute or two, and I've got to think about that and prepare. Are the cars around me starting to move? Are they going to move quickly and start going, or are they just going to sort of inch forward and stop? So you got to figure out and be aware of what's around you all the time to know what gear you should be in and how much throttle input you should put, and when you want to engage the clutch and what gear you want to go into next, whether it's going down a gear or up a gear or go into neutral. These are things that you always have to think about, and they do become second nature when you drive, but it's a different level of awareness. I think that's probably the best way to put it when you're driving a manual, in terms of understanding what's around you and predicting traffic and things like that. Okay, here's another interesting one. How many manual transmission cars do you see on the road? Not many. And I genuinely do this. When I walk through parking lots or when I go to the mall or things like that, I'm always taking a look to see which car is a manual, and most of them aren't. A lot of them are automatics. And that's because people just prefer that. It's easier. People don't have the skill with driving a manual. They don't want to sort of deal with the burden of it in traffic, things like that. There's always an excuse. But the truth of the matter is, if you want something that's a bit more rare, driving a manual car gives you that rarity. There are not that many manual cars on the road, and it's special, it's cool, it's interesting. You know, I drive my manual Volkswagen Golf R, and people look at it and they're interested in the fact that it's a Golf R, and then they see it's a manual, and all of a sudden there's a whole new level of interest and enthusiasm because it's different. How many people really drive a manual car nowadays? So if you want something that's truly unique, maybe you should consider driving a manual car in 2024. Okay, this one's a bit of an interesting one. If you buy a manual car, it's typically cheaper still than an automatic. And I'm not talking about some of the hypercars because sometimes they charge more, but I'm talking about things like just your normal Volkswagen Jetta or Honda Civic or Mazda 3. You know, there aren't a lot of options that are available still now, but even with your BMWs and some Porsches, you can still buy a manual transmission car, and in most cases, they don't charge you more for it. And in some cases, it'll actually be cheaper than the automatic. So it's great. I mean, it's not a big difference, but if you're saving $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 because you're getting a manual transmission, if cost is really important to you, that's going to help you get into the car that you want because now you can save a little bit of money. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason why you should buy a manual car, and it's probably the last thing on people's list of reasons for why they want to buy a manual car, but I had to throw it in there. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't. Here's another one that I've sort of dealt with a lot when I was growing up. So my first car when I bought my Mazda 6 a long time ago when I was 22 was a manual. And the best thing about it was nobody knew how to drive it. And the reason why that was so great is so many times people would say, hey, do you mind if I borrow your car? Do you mind if I just use your car for something quick and I want to do something? I don't have to give it to them because they don't know how to drive it. And so it saves me from having to explain to people, you know, I really don't want you to drive my car. I care too much about it. I'm a little nervous you're going to scratch it or dent it or not treat it properly. I just tell them, I'm sorry, it's a manual car and you don't know how to drive it, so I can't help you. And you look like the good person. So it's a great thing. I love not having to come up with excuses of why I don't want people to drive my car. But it's great because not that many people can. And so that's a unique experience where if you really enjoy driving, now you've kind of set yourself up as being the designated driver if you drive a manual. And some people may say that's a bad thing, but I love it. So not being able to give your car to people, I think, is a plus. Okay, another thing that I think is really interesting is driving a manual car keeps you sharp. Now, what I mean by that is just like people who multitask and do all these exercises to, have their brain allow them to do two different things at the same time. I think about people who play musical instruments, piano players, drummers, guitarists, people who have to use both hands or feet at the same time. That's keeping you sharp because your mind is thinking, it's building those neural pathways, it's keeping them strong, it's helping you not forget how to do things. So it's kind of like doing those math puzzles and all those other things that people do to help prevent losing their memory. Driving a manual car will keep you a little bit sharper as time goes on. Now, I'm not an expert in neuroscience, but I know that if I can keep doing this stuff, it helps keep me on my toes and make sure that I'm always using all of my skills in the best way that I can. And driving with 2 feet and 2 hands is definitely an important skill and something that will help, I hope, keep me sharp as I get older. Now, the next one that I want to talk about is something that I've thought about quite a bit when I bought my car, my Volkswagen Golf R. Now, this may not be true in the end, so don't hold me to it, but I have a sneaky suspicion that as time goes on, the cars that we buy are going to have varying degrees of depreciation. And manual cars, specifically manual performance cars, in my opinion, are probably going to hold their value a lot better in the long run than their automatic counterparts. And we've seen that a lot in history over time. The manual transmission versions of, the hypercars out there and the supercars and all the really cool stuff, they're always holding their value a little bit better than their automatic counterparts. And I think that's going to be even more true as cars become more autonomous. Now, the reason why I say that is, especially with electric cars, you don't really have something unique about the car anymore. Everything is quick. Everything is responsive. You've got really great tech There's very little that separates those cars nowadays from the cars that we're sort of used to with manual transmissions and internal combustion engines. And when people start to sort of drive those cars on the masses, they're going to be waiting for something special. They're going to want something that they're not getting in that experience. And the only thing that's going to really, I think, make the difference is driver engagement. You know, if cars are all going from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour or 0 to 60 miles an hour in less than 3 seconds or less than 2 seconds, how much faster can you go, right? If you're going, you know, from 0 to 60 or from 0 to 100 kilometers in less than a second, you know, there's only so much quicker you can possibly experience before you pass out for an average person. We're not all fighter jet pilots. And so that novelty of that quick acceleration that makes people really love their Tesla Model 3 performance and Y performances and Model S plaids, you know, it's great, but it's a novelty. It's something that's really exciting. And then over time, you get used to the speed, you get used to the acceleration. But the one thing you will never sort of get bored of is that driver engagement, because you feel the car, you're part of the car, you're part of the experience. And that's something I feel like people are going to miss as cars get more autonomous and as electric cars become more popular. So over time, you know, in the next decade or so, people are going to look back and say, you know what, I really miss having that opportunity to drive the car and, you know, be part of that experience. Or I really miss changing gears myself. And they're going to want to buy those manual cars, and there won't be a lot of them out there. So those people who have them, they're going to have an edge. They're going to be worth something. So that's just something that I've thought about. Again, I'm not predicting the future. I don't know what's going to happen in 20, 30 years from now. But that's a feeling that I have based on my knowledge and understanding and sort of watching where the market has gone over the last 20 years that I've been aware of it. So maybe that's a reason to buy a manual car. It may be worth something later on. The last thought of why maybe driving a manual car in 2024 and beyond would be worth your while is it just maintains your driving skill. Now, the last video that I put up, I talked a little bit about the way technology is changing the way that we behave. It's changing our ability to learn, develop certain skills, and we tend to forget things, and we're not as in tune with those skills as we once were because technology is taking over that. And so the skill of driving a car is slowly going away. Anybody can get into a car now and drive. You don't really need much skill because the car can do a lot of the driving for you. Whereas in the past, you needed to be a lot more skilled as a driver in terms of spatial awareness, in terms of modulating the throttle and the brakes and the steering inputs and all that stuff, because you didn't have all the safety nets around you. But now that's starting to go away. There are so many safety nets around us that make driving less skillful and more of a, let's just get you from point A to point B as safe as possible without a hitch. And so that's something that I feel like is going to be lost in a few years. People aren't going to have the same skill of driving a car. And when you drive a manual, that is the ultimate skill of driving. It gives you that ability to know what's happening, to predict what's going on. We talked about that in some of the earlier points. And if you can drive a manual car, you're way more in tune to the driving experience than other people. And so I truly believe that that's going to really help in terms of skill and making sure that you're focusing on the act of driving a car, not distracted, and being aware of what's around you and predicting traffic and all of that kind of stuff. That's a skill of driving a car that slowly will go away soon. So those are the reasons why I truly believe driving a manual car in 2024, buying a new car that's a manual in 2024 is actually a good decision. And I know some of you are probably going to laugh at that and say, you know what, Yosef, those are a bunch of useless excuses. I don't really care about that stuff. But for some people, this may put a thought in your mind, maybe a little spark that says, you know what, maybe there's something to that. Maybe it's worth me going out and trying to learn how to drive a manual car. And maybe it's something that I'm interested in now that I didn't think about before. Anyways, I hope the video was helpful. This is something, again, that I'm really passionate about. I hope all of you get to learn how to drive a manual car and that you get to experience it at some point in your life, because why not? It's another experience and another skill that you can learn. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week, and we'll catch you in the next video. Take care.